was he taken as a kid by the Jedi? Like, is that why he had to forget his parents? And then 2, he goes on and says your focus determines your reality. So
Yeah.
the holidays are over, but Star Wars perseveres and pushes on. So we are back to talk not just one episode of Skeleton Crew, but 2 episodes. And in my opinion, maybe the 2 best episodes. We've got episodes 5 and 6 of Skeleton Crew to break down. Kevin, I mean, just initial thoughts for episode 5 and 6. Let's get right into the grades. What did you think about these 2? So you can do like each episode and then also like maybe a combined grade.
I mean, it was 2 really good episodes. I mean, I don't think we've gotten a bad episode yet. But these were both at the top of my list. 5 was a lot of fun. We don't get as much, obviously 6 is much more of a character episode than 5 is. 5's a big plot episode, but it's all still so fun. And it's a lot of fun to watch. And I think one of the things we texted immediately after this week's episode is, like, the plot points are straightforward. Like, there's nothing that's like a crazy huge surprise, but the way they get to everything still continues to be really interesting. And there's a lot of nuance to how things happen the way they're going to happen, but it's still a surprise somehow.
Right.
And so I just love that nature of the show, because I feel like it's been that way from the start. And I feel like 5 and 6 really just kind of continued that. So maybe liked 5 as a whole a little bit more than 6, just because the Jod side of things in 6 was a little less interesting to me. But man, the side of the story with the kids was, I mean, they knocked it out of the park with that.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. Like, episode 5 kind of had it all for me. Very few complaints. I did think it was kind of funny how quickly SM33 was just, oh yeah, that's fine. Like, I'll tell you everything. Because when that first happened, I was like, oh, can they really like just completely overlook everything like that just happened and move forward? But I think it turned out okay. But man, everything else in that episode was so good. And then episode 6, it was a little bit slower, but it was character driven. Like, it's hard to follow up. Star Wars does really well in episode 5. It's kind of like what we talked about in this series, and it did so here too. But I think it was a good follow up. So like, if I'm grading the 2, I'm probably going 9.5 for episode 5. I thought it was like near perfect as far as this show goes. Because again, we are grading these within the vacuum of this show. So I would say like a 9.5 for episode 5, and then probably like an 8, 7.5, 8 for episode 6. Still really good. I would say, like, if you're watching them in one sitting together, I'd give it a 9 for the 2 episodes.
I agree with you on 5. I give it a 9.5. It was just a lot of fun. Like you said, the 33 thing was a little weird because they wake him up and he is just fine.
It was quick. Yeah.
Like, at least allude to the fact that he was, like, oh, maybe it was a memory issue. Like, why was he going crazy? But now he's fine, right? Like, but no, the rest of the episode, man, took off, and it was so good. There's some really, and it's a very Jod-centric episode in a lot of ways. The kids are hilarious in that episode.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of really cool things from Jod in 5. And then 6, I'd still give 6 a 9.
Yeah.
And that's just how much I love the kids' side of the story, because I really didn't care too much for Jod with the pirates. It was fine. It drove the plot along. But man, if the Jod part was more interesting, I might have given this episode a 10, just because that's how much I loved the story side with the kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about where I settled.
I love how, like, anytime the episodes take a character focus on the kids, they're so good. Like, they go really deep in. Like, both KB episodes are so good. I mean, I'm a big fan of her character. So let's jump in, though. Let's jump into episode 5. I think we probably have a lot to talk about there. So the episode itself starts off kind of like what we said. It's just, it was that, I mean, episode 4 ends and you're like, SM33's on top of Neil. They just powered him off. And you're like, man, what are they going to do? And then episode 5 kind of starts off as if that never happened. So that was kind of like,
pick up on the ship.
Yeah. So to me, when that started, I was like, but then from there it just kept going. Like you get Jod. I mean, I think the majority of this is going to center on Jod, right? This conversation for episode 5, and then a good chunk of episode 6 too. But Jod in episode 5, I mean, how good was it? We start off that episode and he's talking about like to Wim. Wim is just kind of down. He's on his own, and he mentions, you know, I know you miss your parents or whatever. I forget them, right? Like forget your parents. And that's kind of alluding back to, was he taken as a kid by the Jedi? Like, is that why he had to forget his parents? And then 2, he goes on and says your focus determines your reality. So is that a thing?
Get a nice little callback.
Yeah, so I think that's so interesting there that it goes, okay, you get that hint, okay, he's potentially kidnapped by the Jedi as a child, and 2, okay, he's quoting Jedi things. So either he's really into the charade, or he was at the temple for some time. And I loved that it started off that way.
Yeah. And it's really interesting too, because the way he talks about attachment, though, like he kind of seems a Jedi, but the way he talks about attachment is also very Sith-like. Because he talks about it in a way that's like very like it holds you back. Not that it's like bad for you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the interesting things between the Jedi and the Sith, is that they both don't like attachment, but for very different reasons.
Right. Yeah.
And so I wonder, you know, could he have had run-ins with both? Like, could he have been on both sides at some point? And now he's like, none of these guys are working out for me. I'm striking out on my own. Man, I am going to be really curious to find where his experience with the Force has been and what groups he's been aligned with.
Especially since he's not just like, because at first the question was, is he using like the magnetic things? Is he really using the Force? And it's like, no, he is. But is he actually that into it? And then he's just like making stuff float around and everything, seemingly at will at this point when he needs to. So I think he's not just a nobody at this point. I don't think that's kind of where they're going to go, and not in like a negative way. When we talk about Rey nobody, things like that, that's not what we mean. We're talking, is his character going to be one of, you know, past significance, or is he just a guy that knows the Force? I think it is probably going to be one of past significance, is the way that it kind of is shaping up there.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, I wouldn't be surprised if I wouldn't be surprised if you know, he's a Jedi Order survivor, or if he even left before all that went down. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he became an Inquisitor, right, and left that too. Like, I feel like there's a lot of pathways that'd be really interesting for him. Because somebody had mentioned that on one of the comments a few weeks ago, and I hadn't thought about that. But he says some things that are very not Jedi-like, and so, and it may just be that he's done with the Jedi, you know.
Yeah, and I think if you compare him, I think the easiest comparison, obviously, of his age and kind of what we've seen is a Balin's skull, right? So you compare him to Balin, who was very much in the Jedi Order and just survived getting out. Yeah. He's still like, he says some Sithy type things, you know, some dark side things, but by and large, I think you look at him in that gray to light side area with the way he carries himself, the way he says things. He's not just like inherently evil, right? It's kind of along the lines of how Count Dooku carried himself, but not that far. And so you see that very much so Balin was in the Order for quite some time, and that was his life. You don't see that in Jod quite yet. So it does make you wonder, like, did he get out early? Is he actually like trained a little bit in the dark side? What's the deal there? I think that's still a question that needs to be answered for me after episode 5.
And I would say one of the, just bringing up differences between Balin and Jod, like Balin was so straightforward, right? Yeah, he was not there to mislead anybody, whereas Jod is about as deceptive and consistently lying as you can possibly be. So Jod doesn't carry any sort of that sense of honor or that sense of like, I'm going to be straightforward with you that we kind of saw with Balin. So
yeah, he's the least straightforward person in maybe any Star Wars media we've ever seen, because he is just. But again, it's just that's the fun part of the question, is you get glimpses where, is he fooling us? You know how he goes around just fooling everybody. Are we also being fooled? And I hope that's the case. Like, if you can build that character up to where the audience doesn't know either, you've done a really good job at it. So A+ writing for Jod, in my opinion. Also, in episode 5, another interesting thing I thought was the world building for the spa planet.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't expecting going to this big spa, and it's so funny that it's the planet where like Renaud was. And then it wasn't nice. It's like acid baths or whatever and things like that. And then all of a sudden it's this luxurious world where the Moons and the banking clan shows up and gets away for a little bit. And so I think they did a good job world building post the Empire as well. I mean, this thing's probably been that way for quite some time, but it's funny that now, okay, it was this, and they're just making a ton of money off of it. It kind of reminds you, like, nothing's wrong with this, by the way, if you're like a wedding venue person, but in our world today, especially like in the Midwest to Southeast, there's quite a culture of taking this crummy old barn and then like putting some lipstick on it and charging tens of $1,000s for a wedding venue. That's kind of what I pictured out of this. Like, it's this thing that wasn't nice, and now it's where everybody wants to be at. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because it shows you that the people on the upper end of this galaxy, they came out of all this okay, right? Like the fact that there's been this war going on, like there's this empire that's and out here you just have this spa on this planet where the banking clan's just kind of hanging out. So I love that it's like parts of the galaxy have because they're the rich ones, they kind of remain untouched, right? Like,
doesn't matter.
Who cares in charge, right? Like as long as we're making the money.
Yeah, and that is such a good world building tidbit that almost flies under the radar in the rest of everything else going on. Is how the rest of the like different aspects of the galaxy live. We always end up on some poor sand planet or like some desolate ice world, something like that. We never truly get a lot of this stuff, right? We get Canto Bite, and
just the fact that it exists is fun.
So like getting a little glimpse into the upper crest of society, which we are actually getting more of that built in the last few years of Star Wars between Andor, The Last Jedi again had Canto Bite, the new video game has Canto Bite in it too. So like just little things like that. So I do appreciate this level of world building that is so different than everything else we've seen in Star Wars. I do like that. Agreed. Now, another thing on this planet, did you see, you saw, I guess, the moons, right? Like the Plagueis deal. Do you think that's like any type of a thing that's coming? Like, I
don't know.
Is this AT-AT thing like a Plagueis plan and Palpatine's just kind of taking it over? Or is this just kind of like what they were talking about before the show came out, where there's just Easter eggs sprinkled around? That's just one of those.
Yeah, I think it's just Easter, because I think the moons, they were like associated with the banking clan, weren't they?
That was their deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it makes sense for them to be there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a glimpse of a larger picture, but again, it's just so much fun, the stuff that they have. I mean, this show has just been packed full of just an alien species here, or an object here, or an emblem here, just so many things. Callbacks to other stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
Kind of an unconsequential Easter eggs all throughout this show, which is fun. Like, it's not like, oh, you got to be glued in and go look at all of this stuff. It's just, if you catch it, it's fun. If you don't and you see it later, you're like, oh, that's cool.
I love the Hut eating the little, trying to eat the little servant guy.
Yeah, that was good too. Yeah, that was fun. And then another thing we learned in episode 5, this is probably like the last big thing. Two more big things, I guess. We'll kind of tie it to the end of this. But we learn a lot, or I guess we learn what we suspected of AT-AT. It's they printed Old Republic mint. And so that was kind of the big reveal we were expecting at this point, because they all did have all of those, mint coins and stuff like that. So not super unsuspecting, but it's a confirmation there. And at that point, Jod realizes he can go to this planet that's just essentially printing money. Like, you can say they're printing money because that's what they do. And that's kind of where things turn. They get to the end of all the booby trap layer for Renaud, and there's treasures everywhere. And all of a sudden he realizes, I have unlimited treasure. That's what is AT-AT. Like, it's literally unlimited treasure. Yeah. And so he initiates that challenge for the captain, which is in the pirate code, or I think that's what he said. It's in the pirate code, or SM-33 confirms it. And so they get to that scene, and the kids actually fight back, which was a lot of fun. I thought they were just going to do like what he said, like, I concede. And they didn't, which I don't know that I was expecting that. I just thought they would give it up and go with him. But they fight, and then Wim ends up with that lightsaber. How cool is that?
That was great. He holds that thing up, and
it's got the wrong way.
you can see he's holding it the wrong way. You're just like, oh, here we go. And I love it. Man, that thing just goes flying. That was funny.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about it is like them revealing, like, yes, they told us it's an old Republic mint, but that doesn't really do anything to take away the mystery we still don't know about this planet, which is who's running it, why is it still running, what do these people with jobs actually do on this planet? There's still a ton of mystery to it, even though they've just told us what it is, which I love. And then, Jod's turn is so good because he reaches that point where he realizes, I don't need these kids anymore, right? Like, you really see that's the only reason he's kept them around this far is because maybe I still need them. Maybe they'll be useful. He's got the coordinates. He has what he needs. Like he has no need for these kids anymore. And so he immediately flips that switch. And so it really does kind of point back to this whole time. He's just been keeping them around, not because he seems to care about them, not because he wants them around, but hey, I might need them, right? Like he's the one. When they go see Kim, he's like, hey, we don't need a map. They know, like we could use them.
Yeah.
So he's been using them this whole time. As soon as they're no longer part of the plan, man, that turn is so good.
Yeah.
Because he just shifts completely as a character. And I love the captain challenge. He's been holding that one in his back pocket for a while until the right time.
Because it's just a bunch of kids. So he knew. Yeah. And it takes SM-33 out of the picture. It's like very sharp on his side.
Yeah, and he could have done that at any point, right? He could have challenged, but he needed the kids.
He needed
their cooperation.
Yep.
So I loved the way all that went down.
Yeah, and also just that kind of wrapping up episode 5, that closing shot, because we open the episode almost with a sympathetic Jod, thinking he's kind of this benevolent old Jedi talking to Wim, cheering him up, getting them through, and then you get to the end, and the title of the episode was You Have a Lot to Learn About Pirates, and it's almost like a double meaning, because at first it's like, oh, they have to learn like that woman turning them in, and these guys are bad, they want to get you. Well, it turns out at the end they had a lot to learn about Jod. So he takes the lightsaber and he's holding it in that scene, and you're like, oh, this isn't good Jod, this is bad Jod. And then it closes, and that was the $1 million shot for this season so far for me, was him holding that saber, because from here out I don't think things can slow down, which is a lot of fun, and it takes us right into episode 6, which is fun.
He seems to have a sense of familiarity with the saber too. It doesn't seem like the first time he's held a lightsaber. So
I'm so interested to learn why.
It'll be fun to see when that thing actually comes out.
Because he's got it on that ship, I'm assuming.
I mean, you don't see them take it. So
he's still just kind of, let's get into episode 6 first of all. But he's still just holding it around. So like he's waiting for his spot. He's so measured. So we get into episode 6, really 2 legs of this story. We have the Jod story and the kids separate. The Jod story was a little slow for you. So let's just keep talking about him while we're kind of on it. But he comes crawling out of that thing with like all the gold around him. And then SM-33 comes up, and he also has all the gold around him too. But he gets captured so easy, which is kind of the situation he finds himself in kind of frequently. Just troubles always getting him. He can't quite get past it. But then he has that speech on the pirate ship with Brutus, and again the pirate code, and he gets to kind of defend himself or give an argument, and equal time, and they flip the hourglass. So he gives that speech, and it's like, this is the most rehearsed speech he's ever had, where he's like, I'm hungry, I've always been hungry, and he keeps going from there. And I talked about this last night when we were recapping it live, when Padawan Chronicles and I were doing that. And if you're watching it with subtitles, you don't quite pick it up if you don't have subtitles on. But if you do, it shows all the different pirates starting to buy into him as he's talking.
Yeah, I did see that. We watch everything on subtitles.
Yeah, it's like a pro tip now for everyone. So if you're watching it on subtitles, you pick it up. It starts off and they're like, "What's he rambling about?" And then by then they're like, "Yeah, he's right." Things like that. So you can see in that speech he gives, he slowly turns the whole crew against it or back to his side. And at the end, Brutus takes him over to the airlock, and he's like, "If there's nothing here, that's going to be you." So he did get his chance. They bought in. So he once again has just got himself out of a terrible situation, and he's still going. So I do think at some point, with him having that lightsaber, I think he's going to use his little pirate code challenge on Brutus and take the crew to At-Aten, is my assumption.
I can see that.
With the lightsaber, kind of what we were talking about.
Yeah.
He's still got it. He's waiting for the right chance.
And Brutus, that would be interesting because Brutus doesn't seem to care too much about the pirate code, right? Like he goes along with it because the others are around him.
Because there's a lot of people.
We got to do it.
Yep.
And so there does seem to be kind of a shift in between, like kind of the older pirates and the ones that are coming up. But you know, I think Jod, this is a familiar position for Jod. We saw it in episode 1 where that gold's not there, and they start turning on him. They're like, "Well, you said this was it. Like you said this was the big score. Like where is it, Captain?" But kind of like last episode, Jod knows pirates, right? He knows that it doesn't matter that he's led them astray and failed them already. The promise of treasure is too great.
Still out there.
And so and I think we all know that he's not loyal to anybody on that ship, right? But again, that's the great part about this show is you know exactly where Jod's line is headed, right? He's trying to get to the treasure so he can betray everyone and get it for himself. But how that's going to happen, that's all still the mystery. So I mean, I liked this. It was, the space shanty, singing the pirate space shanty was fun. But it was what I expected. I knew that Jod would get on and smooth talk his way out of it. So it wasn't bad by any means. It was just
wasn't as good as its counterpart.
It was where is Jod now? That was kind of the point of that segment, I felt like.
Yeah. And when you're comparing it to the kids' story, it's not on the same level.
Not at all. Yeah.
Kind of getting into their side of things now, they are immediately in trouble. Jod has not that they've not been self-sufficient, but they have been self-sufficient in the realm of Jod's always there to pull him out of any trouble if he needs to. And so now they don't have that. So they've made it out of the layer or whatever. They go through that chute, and they're just kind of out on the ledge of this big spa planet cliff.
Yeah.
Their ship is up high. They need it. Don't have it, obviously, and conflicting ways on how to go about things. So Fern is determined to go one way, and KB, it turns out, with her character development, obviously, it wasn't that climbing up there wasn't necessarily the issue. It's like that she couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so it goes from, because at first I was like, oh yeah, that probably would be a very low probability thing to do. And by the end of the episode, it's more of a she can't admit that she can't do it type of thing. So you get some growth for her. You've got Wim having his hero moment with her, and his hero moment's not what he expected it would be. And then you've got Neil being brave and climbing up the ladder. So it was all a lot of good stuff for the kids.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about these kind of conflicts that these kids are having is they're so relatable because they're the kind of things that people carry into adulthood, right? Like Wim's desire to matter. Like you want to be important. You want to do things that matter. KB's fear of if she can't do something that people won't like her, right? If she can't meet a standard, if she can't keep up. And then Fern, like one of the really interesting things I felt like with Fern is in episode 5, like she's aware of KB's issue. Like when they're talking about her hesitancy to go down into those baths, she's like, well, no, it might corrode or mess up. So she's aware of KB's issues and like she knows that it's an issue, but as soon as she gets into that point of stress, like she forgets about the people around her, right? So there's just these shades of things that we deal with, like even in adulthood, of like how you interact with people. And so we'll talk about it, but I love like the solution to all of it is to have people around you that help you. Like I just think that message is so cool. Like you have these struggles, they're relatable, right? They're a part of being human, but like the people around you make a huge difference. And we see that with a lot of it's
yeah.
I love the way all that played out with the characters.
Well, and Neil is just the classic "don't rock the boat," like don't get out of your comfort zone character, and he all four of them had moments of growth in this episode, and I don't think that's happened in any episode yet where all four of them do.
Yeah,
right. It's been a couple or 3 out of 4 or something like that, but this time it was all 4, which was a really nice touch. We can start with Neil because his is the quickest, right? Like obviously,
it's a little more subtle.
Yeah, he ends up going with Fern, which immediately did kind of surprise me because that is not his type of thing. And so his deal is he's having a really hard time climbing, and she's telling him just keep going and stuff. And then you get it to where she's hooked to him, right? So he just needs someone to help him keep going, and he can do it. So they're going, and he is doing it, right? Then at the end of the episode, he's piloting as well. And so they were like, hey, you've done it before, you can do it again. So him just slowly but surely coming out of that little safe bubble in pretty like good big situations is fun to watch.
Yeah, and Neil hates conflict, right? Like he's always the one to be like, guys, stop fighting, right? Like that's happened a few times throughout the episode. But he challenges Fern. He's like, hey, you need to understand not everybody can do what you do.
Yep.
And so we see him, walk into conflict, something that he's not comfortable with, because she's got to get called out on the fact that she's not aware of the people around her. And that was such a cool moment where he's like, listen, you're not paying attention. Like you're not seeing the people around you. Because Neil's honest, but he's also not one to confront
directly.
People. And so, but and Fern needed that honesty. She needed somebody who was going to tell her like it is. So all these interactions were just really good.
Well, I love too, like talking about Fern's development in this episode. Again, not quite to the level of Wim, maybe similar to Wim's, but not the level of KB's. But hers, it's not that she doesn't need to be assertive and lead, because obviously people do need to be that way, right? The world needs people that are headstrong and that will go into situations and kind of grab life by the horns. She's that person, but she needs that spatial awareness of how she's doing it, right? Like you can't just drag people along. You have to lead alongside the people. And she gets little glimpses of that here and there. And I think this episode was one of those, but she's still like, her character is very firmly in the, you have to get stuff done. So she ends up like going to get the kids, right? Like they get the little ship and they make it. And so
that's true.
It's not that the way she's doing or the thing that she's doing is wrong. It's just the way she's doing it needs to be maybe fine touched a little bit refined. And we see that happening as these episodes go through.
Yeah, because I mean, really, in terms of which way is the quickest, she's right. Like
she has to. Yeah,
she is correct about which way is fastest to get to the ship.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean it's the best way for the group.
Right.
But yeah, because we saw it in episode 4 where she has that meltdown because she feels like she can't lead all these kids. Like she doesn't know what to do. Because that's her focus. She feels like if she can't make the decision, she's failing. And so it was cool to see her kind of come to that realization.
Yeah. And moving into Wim now, his is a lot of fun because this whole season has really just dialed in on the fact that he needs an adventure. He needs, kind of like what you said, he needs to be made important, right? Feel that he has meaning in his journey, and he thinks it's a lot bigger purpose than his current deal on his boring planet where everybody's just pushing paper. And he wants this big Jedi adventure. And you see him in episode 5, the minute he has the opportunity with a lightsaber, that's not his thing. Like he has it upside down. But and that was a big moment, right? If he could have ignited it, Jod would have took it either way, right? But it's like he has a fighting chance. In the next episode, it turns out his big moment doesn't involve a lightsaber, doesn't involve, going out and doing some outlandish thing. It's just corroding some wires or burning some wires to help KB like get her little brain, whatever it was, going again. And so he's just having to take her commands, do the little mundane things, but he saves her in terms of doing all that. And so I really like the touch there that the most exciting thing he's done so far and the most influential thing he's done is just such a simple, mundane task with a very big implication on it. I thought that was really cool for him. Now, will they move any, past that? I'm sure he'll do something big by the end of this, but that was really cool to see.
Yeah, he's such a. It's funny to me the lack of sense of urgency he has, where he's just like, "Hey, look at these trash crabs. Why don't we follow them and see where see where they go? Surely that's faster than just climbing up to the ship. So it cracks me up because he's just constantly looking around. He's constantly trying to figure things out. And even like when KB comes with him, he's like, "Be honest. You think this is a bad idea too. You just came because you're mad at Fern." But yeah, like and KB needs somebody who is just willing to stop and be aware, right? Because as soon as that begins to break down and KB's like, "We got a problem," he's immediately on it. He's like, "What can we do? How can I help?" And he's only able to be in that position because he's not so dead set on, well, what's the solution? Like the only thing that matters is the solution. That's kind of where Fern is where Wim's just distracted by everything, which is hilarious.
He's a classic middle school boy.
He really is. Yeah. In a lot of ways. And those crabs crack me up. They just, really good narrative use though. The way they repeat everything they say and how it seems hopeful, but then it seems ominous, but just by repeating the kids' words. Those are really good little touch.
It was.
But yeah, I love that Wim, it's not even that he does something that matters, but he even gets affirmed for it, right? Like KB says, "Hey, this is, you saved my life," right? Like makes a point of letting him know. But then I love that she says, "Thank you, Jedi," right?
Yeah. Kind of affirming what he wants out of things.
Like that's so intentional on her part to be like, "Hey, you did something that mattered."
A big
thing.
Like
this thing that you idolize, this, the Jedi, Wim loves them because they're these pictures of like protection and like courage and bravery. And so for her to kind of acknowledge that in him is really cool because, she's not just going to call it, like, she knows what she's doing when she calls him Jedi. She knows how he views the Jedi. And so that was such a cool little add-on. It's not just a simple thank you, but it's like, hey, you are what you're idolizing. Like you've just done something that really matters. And so that part was really cool.
Also, how perfect of a picture of the Jedi is that at the same time? Because you think, okay, post the Clone Wars, like you start Clone Wars out, yes, they are all war heroes. Exactly what every kid would think they are, which now he doesn't know them from that. But they're actually just people with jobs within this order. So if you read, it's a newish book, it's like some kind of Tales of Light and Life or something like that. I forget what it's called, but it's the new book. It's like before the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of stories of the Jedi within it. And so one thing that I think was pretty cool in that book is you figure out what a lot of these Jedi's jobs are, and they're not exciting. Like Yaddle goes in and she's essentially just going through like accidents that the Jedi do, and they're not liable for it, but there's still fallout and repercussions legally. So she's just kind of going through like, how do we make things right for the people that we accidentally wronged? So it's one of those things that it's okay. He didn't do anything crazy with the saber. He didn't defeat a bad guy. He just did a good thing that kept things going. And that's very much pre-Clone Wars, what the Jedi were doing. Obviously peacekeepers, things like that, but they just do good things. And so that almost seemed like an acknowledgement to that as well.
Yeah, the idea that the most important person around you is the person that needs help, right? Like that's kind of the mindset of the Jedi originally is how do we help people who are in need? So
the book is The Living Force. That's what it's called.
And Wim immediately jumps on that. Like there's no hesitation. He's like, tell me what to do. And I'll do it. So
agreed. Now KB, her story is the biggest one for this. It's kind of okay, she's got I don't want to say she's got a disability or anything, but she kind of does, right? Like she can't do certain things. She's had an accident. She's had something to help her keep going after said accident. We don't really have much knowledge there, but she has capability. What's the right word I'm looking for? She can't do certain things, limitations, right, for what she can do. And so she has to realize that it's okay that she has limitations. She's got to keep going. Like if you can't do something, you have to just be open about it, right? You can't just cover up or argue with Fern about it or anything like that. You just have to be open with it. And she realizes that at the end of the episode, like she apologizes. She's saying, hey, sorry, I need to be more open with you. I can't do these things, whatever it is. And so she comes from like she is the smartest person, right? Like she knows all the plans of what they need to do, but she also has to be open with herself, which I thought was nice as well.
Sorry, random side note, because I just thought about this. Who do you think she called in the X-Wings?
Oh, she could have, because
they super randomly show up otherwise.
Yeah, she could have, and she said if she ever needs help, just let Kim know.
Yeah. So I halfway wonder if like, I don't know, but anyway.
No, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. That's like
I was wondering if that was her, and if maybe that was like a big stress on her systems too.
I hope we learn that in the next episode.
But no, yeah. To your point, we get. I almost said we get to peek inside her head a little, but let's both
firmly tongue planted in cheek,
literally and figuratively.
Yeah,
because this is something that she deals with all the time. Like none of these other kids have to think about this idea of how do I need to take care of myself so that literally my body doesn't stop functioning. Yeah. Right. Like and you can tell in this interaction, it's something she has to think about
all the time.
The way she talks about fixing this thing and how it was really close, like it almost sounds like maybe this isn't the first time something like this has happened, where like something's gone wrong and it's had to be fixed really quickly. Like
she was super cool about it.
Really cool, knew exactly what to do. And so the fact that we get a little bit in on this, that this is for the kid, for Wim, it's like a momentary thing where he has to save her, right? Mm-hmm. For Fern, it's a concern when they're at the baths and she's like, oh, is this going to be okay? But for KB, like it's all the time, right? She has to be constantly aware of this thing that saved her, but also is a huge liability under the wrong circumstances. And so, I think the fear of having to be vulnerable with people, like, because, well, if I'm not good enough, are they still going to be my friend? Are they friends with me because of the role that I serve? Yep. I think that's relatable to a lot of people. So I love that she goes through this, and I love that she seems so surprised when Wim's like, well, we'll be your friends. Me and Neil will be your friends. Because it's like she hadn't quite thought that through. They're like, oh, these guys are my friends now too. Yep. And you kind of see it dawn on her. Yeah. Which is a really cool thing, that it's not zero friends again, but her friends are actually expanding. Like she's got more than one now.
Yep.
And so I like that realization is really kind of the opposite of what she thinks is going to happen. The name of the episode, that zero friends again.
Yeah.
So man, what a good little segment for our characters here.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, kind of like what you said, it's something she's always thinking about. Like, how long has she been carrying that? Because her crew she hangs out with of just Fern is not really a slow down crew. So, I mean, I feel like she's probably just always having to keep up and maybe risking things sometimes. Like, I probably shouldn't be doing this. And here it turns into no, I can be vulnerable with these people. I can say like, hey, I can't climb that mountain right there. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was nice. I thought it was just a really cool development for her. And also just the actress. I don't know her name. I haven't seen it. I've got to be better about that. But she just did a great job with the whole episode. And the way they shot the episode, Bryce Dallas Howard was the one for this episode. So like the way they shot it was so good. It was just a lot of tension in situations that weren't necessarily crazy tense, right? Like you're not blowing up a Death Star. You're not stealing the plans for the Death Star. You're not fighting in the Clone Wars or, the World Between Worlds, things like that. This is just kids out on their own, but it's a big situation for them. And so they kind of captured the magnitude of everything in a way that felt like very heavy. So I liked that a lot.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's a lot of tension, especially in a scene where you just have these two kids sitting in the sand, nothing going on around them, melting some wires, but it's full of tension. It does. And so, and I love, like, after this is over, KB's just like, all right, let's go.
Let's go. She's like immediately fine. It's
and
like
William's trying to process, like, wait, what do you mean by shut down? Like, what just happened here?
Total shutdown or something like that.
And she's just ready to move on. Like, again, it harkens back to like, this is such a normal part of her life, and like it's giving the other kids a glimpse into, okay, so maybe maybe there are ways we can help each other out here. And so and so going back to what I said earlier, I love that this is just like all four of these kids have their own issues, but like they're benefiting from being around someone else who's either willing to call them out or willing to help them or willing to just say thank you, right? Like you did something good. And just how far those things go, even though they seem so little.
Well, and then you throw it all together at the end of the episode where they're on the ship. It's getting like it's going to go through the incinerator. How cool was it, by the way, that the ship was
so
like
cool.
shedding its skin and going out? That was really awesome. But you see all four of them doing their own big thing as they're going. So you've got like Wim is in the gunner. Was Fern in the gunner as well? Did she go back to that spot?
No, she was going to pilot. She told Neil to hit the thrusters and she was going to steer.
And then KB's doing her usual. She's like kind of hooked into the computer thing. And so they're all doing, again, really big thing. Like that's a tense situation. They're the way that what's about to happen to them. And so they get back to this one point of we got to press the button that SM33 said never to push. And someone has to push the button. And then Fern hits it, right? It's Fern who like rears back and hits the button. And that's how they get out. And the ship looks really cool when they get out.
It does. Too. Yeah, that's a cool scene because again, they showed that in the recap. I don't know if you remembered, but as soon as SM33 tells them that, like in episode 2, you're like,
something's coming.
They're going to push this button at some point, right? Yeah. But again, it's one of those things where they do such a good job of getting to that point in a way you don't expect. Because I would have never expected that Captain Rennet was just so smart and had a brilliant escape plan, right?
Yeah.
It was literally just had a big bulky piece of armor on his ship. And I love that they're just sitting there waiting for Fern. Like she kind of realizes, okay, they're waiting on me to make this decision, and they're not telling her what to do. And she, I love that they're just waiting on her to make the decision at that point.
Which is what she like.
It's kind of all come together.
Yeah, I was gonna say like that they're looking to her and she needs to make versus like just telling everybody what to do. It was the read the room situation that she hasn't always had. Like she had to be the leader there. And she was. And so, again, just full circle, making them little better versions of themselves. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and I love, man, the visual of the ship leaving behind like broken, unnecessary, like useless bulk.
Baggage.
Right?
Yeah.
Leaving behind your broken baggage. Like that's literally what this whole episode was about. So that last shot of that ship pulling off and shedding off and being sleeker and more capable and no longer
that's how they're getting home.
A piece of junk.
Yeah.
That's such a cool thing right there at the end.
Yeah. And they have the coordinates, right? It's their best selves doing what they've needed to do the whole time. And I think
that's so good.
I mean, we're only 6 episodes in, so kind of looking ahead to episodes 7 and 8. There's obviously going to be some drama going on. We've got the pirates going their way. We've got the kids going theirs to Ad-Atten. They're both going to the same place. There's going to be some conflict there. So I think this show, we've talked about it a lot. We don't know where it's going, but we do, right? We know there's going to be a conflict between the two, but what over, right? It can't just be over this whole planet of money because the kids just want to get home and these pirates think they're going to go take over a whole planet, which is also not going to happen. Like they cannot just show up and take over a whole planet that's, policed by robots. So what's going to give? I'm not really sure. I don't really care to like speculate over crazy things anymore, but we're going to have to learn something at some point.
Yeah. And I'm excited about where the pacing has us because there's seemingly nothing in between both of these ships getting back to Ad-Atten.
Nope. We got 2 episodes of it.
So I feel like we get back pretty quick and we have plenty of time to kind of hash this thing out on Ad-Atten because there's still a lot left to do to answer the questions of who's in charge. Is there someone in charge? What are these people still doing there? Whatever really happened to Captain Rennet, right? Did he die like 33 said he did, or
is he running
alive somewhere? Like there's a lot of possibilities. And then what happens with the kids at the end of this? Because one of the things I mentioned to you is I can't imagine the kids are just like, all right, we're home now. And then they just go back to living on Ad-Atten, the hidden world of gold, right? Like something's got to happen with this planet going forward.
Yep.
And so there's a lot to wrap up, but I feel confident because thus far, everything all the mysteries, all the kind of plot points have led to really good surprises. one of the things I really like about the show is I don't feel like there's been anything that's just pointlessly there to create tension or pointlessly there just to make you go, oh, wait, what just happened? Like it's all just been very natural.
Yep.
And so
nothing wasted.
I have a lot of confidence in these next 2 episodes just because this has been it's been really good TV. So
got no reason to be not confident. Like if you go back to the Acolyte, like with the episodes 3 and then episode 6 or 7, episode 3 and 7, it was like, oh my gosh, they have the momentum and they keep blowing it. And then you go to Ahsoka, and it's once they get to Peridia. Now I love Ahsoka, but once they got there, it was kind of like, oh, okay, this is not shaping up very, very well, pacing wise, story wise, all those things. The Mandalorian season 3, I mean, my gosh, did they ever pick up momentum, right? Boba Fett steals all of Boba Fett's momentum and throws it to Mando, but this show, similar to Andor, we're drawing a lot of Andor comparisons now as far as the quality of the story. It just keeps moving forward, which is really fun to see.
Well, I think it's a benefit of being so isolated, right? Like Andor obviously is connected to the rebellion. Like that's a time period we know,
but it's
not connecting
story
to any other shows. And it's the same thing here. Like this isn't they're not even trying to really thus far fit this in with other characters.
Doesn't seem that way.
And storylines. And man, it's been so good just to have a story that's a story of its own. It doesn't feel like it has to connect to all this other stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love all those connecting pieces. I think they're fun. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, like just, man, a fun story in Star Wars, like is enough for me. Like it doesn't always have to have a huge thing at the end that puts it back in line with everything else. Now,
I hope
they
it stays
connect it
that
at
way.
the end. Oh God, water bottle. Do they connect it to the end? I don't know. I mean, honestly, a part of me kind of hopes that it doesn't have a big connecting piece.
I'm leaning that way too.
You got to have it somehow open for these kids to be able to leave, right? Maybe they don't stay on this planet. So there's that, but beyond that, I don't know. Like I can see them wanting to connect it because there's so much out there going on, but at the same time, I'd be completely fine if it didn't.
I trust, regardless of how they go about this thing, 6 episodes in, I trust whatever they decide they're going to do, and I'm pretty cool with it. So that's what's really fun, because it's not always that way, as we've just kind of discussed. So next week we're going to talk episode 7. We'll make our finale predictions, which is always a lot of fun. The following week, we'll break down this whole thing. We'll talk the finale, Skeleton Crew as a whole. I think it's going to be very positive conversation. And then the following week, which is kind of towards the end of January, we're going to do what we talked about doing last week, which would be the what's coming in 2025. So we're going to talk Andor, Visions, things like that. And maybe something does get announced at some point between now and then.
We were getting new Visions.
Yep. So we're going to talk all that once Skeleton Crew is said and done. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week to talk Skeleton Crew episode 7.